Félix Álvarez, 18 años de edad.
What we're trying to do is really speak in solidarity with people of Latin America who have been the victims of our country's foreign policy in this school.
There's a great fear that's gripping the country since 9/11. People are afraid to speak out who spoke out before because they don't want to be considered unpatriotic.
Be a voice for the voiceless. We say that when we're carrying crosses at the protests each year. We're being a voice for those who have been silenced.
Though we may not understand or see the immediate effects of dissent and questioning, in living your life as true as you can be to who you are and to what you believe is right, that's, first of all, a victory in itself.
María Teresa Cerviño, 28 años de edad.
What we say, too, is that you don't teach democracy through the barrel of a gun.
Under the authority of Public Law 100-180, the U.S. Army assigned the school the following mission: to develop and conduct for the Armed Forces of Latin America the most doctrinally sound, relevant, and cost-effective training program possible, enhance military professionalism, foster increased cooperation among the multinational military forces, and expand the Latin American Armed Forces knowledge of American customs and traditions. At the end of World War II, colonialism was being replaced by dictatorships and totalitarian regimes. Protecting democracy in the region was an important element of U.S. foreign policy. The initial emphasis at the school was to teach Latin American militaries how to defend their nations against the spread of Soviet and Cuban-inspired communism, subversion, and insurgencies.
The U.S. Army School of the Americas, or SOA, is a combat training school for Latin American soldiers. The SOA was established in Panama in 1946 to provide military education and training for the nations of Central and South America. Under the provisions of the 1977 Panama Canal Treaty, the school was relocated to Fort Benning, Georgia in 1984. Over its 61 years, the SOA has trained more than 60,000 Latin American soldiers in combat and counterinsurgency techniques. The actions of the school's graduates, and even the continued existence of the school, have concerned many people, including members of the U.S. Congress.
The intent of this amendment is to close the school.
SOA graduates continue to surface in the news, in stories about current human rights cases and new reports on past cases. On November 16, 1989, 6 Jesuit priests, their co-worker, and her teenage daughter were massacred in El Salvador. A U.S. congressional task force reported that the majority of those responsible for the massacre were trained at the U.S. Army School of the Americas. Following this discovery, a movement was born. In 1990, Father Roy Bourgeois started the School of the Americas Watch in a tiny apartment outside the main gate of Fort Benning. Starting with a small group of 10 people fasting outside the gates of the Army base, the SOA Watch quickly drew upon the knowledge and experience of people who'd worked in Latin America in the 1970s and 80s and were aware of the many human rights violations and atrocities that occurred there.
We had no visions back then of a movement. I mean, we had a small motley crew. Some of us had been in Latin America. We felt it was important really to investigate this school, not knowing what we were going to discover.
Stop the repression! Look at this guy. Look at this fella. What's your position? Stop the repression in El Salvador! Our tax dollars are killing priests! Let me just say a word about El Salvador. Maybe it'll help.
Why are we killing priests in El Salvador?
The answer is we're not. Now you be quiet, and here's the answer to your question. We are supporting El Salvador because it had certifiably free elections. President Cristiani is trying to do a job for democracy, and the left-wing guerrillas must not take over El Salvador.
I went to El Salvador to talk with the people there. I was more fearful there than I was in Vietnam or Bolivia. I have never seen such powerless people. I have never seen such a slaughter of the innocents. If you spoke out in any way against U.S. foreign policy or the military regime that was running that country, you were seen as el enemigo, the enemy. It was very easy for you to simply get disappeared. The knock would come at the door at night, and there was a list. People were dragged away.
We have been provided with a lot of declassified documents, and in those documents is proven that the USA Embassy knew that the Salvadoran army was indeed carrying out atrocities.
In 1993, the United Nations Truth Commission on El Salvador found that 47 of the 60 officers guilty of the worst human rights offenses of the Civil War were trained at the U.S. Army School of the Americas, including those who raped and killed 4 American churchwomen, assassinated Archbishop Oscar Romero, and massacred over 900 civilians in the village of El Mozote. The commission also discovered that 19 of the 26 soldiers responsible for the murders of the Jesuit priests, their co-worker, and her daughter were trained at the SOA. This shocking evidence brought thousands of new protesters into the movement to close the School of the Americas.
When we gathered here 15 years ago, we had 10 of us. We gathered to keep alive the memory of the victims. The second year, 50 came, and then 300 and 500 and 1,000. Today, we have over 20,000 of us who are here.
come here today to acknowledge our complacency in the horrible crimes inflicted on the Hispanic Third World in our name through the School of the Americas.
We beg the God of peace to help us close the school of assassins and end all these wars on Iraq and Afghanistan.
I am so very happy to finally be here with you all.
Shut the school down! Shut the school down! Thank you so much!
Y le dicen no a la Escuela de las Américas. No más niños asesinados, ni más gente desplazada por estos criminales.
While the movement to close the School of the Americas has grown over the years, not everyone at Fort Benning or in the surrounding city of Columbus shares the protesters' passion for closing the school.
Their theme seems to be that the School of the Americas is training assassins to go out in foreign countries and kill their leaders. And in this case, I totally support Fort Benning and think Fort Benning is getting a black eye for no reason. I think the curriculum, from what I've seen personally, is simply teaching democracy.
The School of the Americas offers a cost-effective, time-tested approach with immediate, tangible results. It is part of a well-defined policy to promote democracy in cooperation with friends and allies in the hemisphere. It's based on mutual respect and cooperation.
You know, the School of the Americas has served us very well in overthrowing governments in Chile, in Ecuador, in Panama, in Guatemala, and many other places. So I think our foreign policy people see it as a great tool, and yet if you look at it from the standpoint of living in a democracy, it's a very undemocratic institution, and most Americans are unaware either that it exists, or if they know that it exists, they're unaware of what its true function is.
I believe that the heart of America has not been touched because they do not have the information. With the right information, people do the right thing. They just do not know.
If somebody from my high school graduating class was to go out and commit a crime, well, then I wouldn't want to close Hardaway High School. I would simply say that individual there, on his own, has gone out and committed some crime. So if you have somebody that years ago that's graduated from the then School of the Americas and now WHINSEC, then I don't think you should hold that against the entire school. We certainly can't control what other countries do.
There's a tremendous irony in the fact that we do not support democracy around the world by any means. We support governments that help our corporations, or if democratically elected governments stand in the way of helping our corporations, we think nothing of overthrowing them or assassinating their leaders and replacing them with dictators.
Police, the secret police, and other Guatemalan security forces came to my father's place of work and to his home and disappeared. My father, my stepmother, they took my 18-month-old little sister, one of my sisters-in-law, and my two oldest daughters who were 10 and 9. On September 11th of this year, while the United States commemorated the 5th anniversary of the terrorist attacks, that same day I was at home commemorating the 25th anniversary of the disappearance of my family.
We don't really have a sense of what our action is doing in the third world. So we have to have our consciousness, it seems to me, enlarged so that we see ourselves as part of a universal community and not limited to American. I find people that go into the third world, whether for, work or pleasure or for social justice, are changed. La tierra es como mi madre. The sights and sounds, the smells of the third world are indelible. You never forget those. And they draw you further into the heart of third world communities.
The greatest enemy in our country today, I've come to believe, is ignorance. We know so little about other countries, their cultures, their religious beliefs, their histories, so much older than our own. And this issue is giving a lot of people in our country now knowledge of U.S. foreign policy in Latin America.
Going down to the School of the Americas protest that first time is also what led me to El Salvador. I was speaking to a lady from Colombia, and she said, please, I'm asking you to come down to Latin America and see what's going on and see what has happened. I had this yearning to learn more. I wanted to learn about Latin America. I recognized there was children everywhere. During the entire 7 or 8 days that I was up there, I didn't see a single person between the ages of about 25 and 35. And so I finally thought to ask somebody, and they said they're gone. That entire generation was killed during this civil war. This one mother told a story about how she was fortunate because her son had been murdered right in front of her eyes. She saw his face as it was happening. So many of the other mothers, their sons had just disappeared. This blood is on my hands. These people were murdered by soldiers who learned how to murder them with my tax dollars. At a time when prisons are being built faster than schools and aid to students is being cut, I find it offensive that the U.S. government is paying scholarships to soldiers from South and Central America to learn how to torture and oppress their own people. It is not only the soldiers who are operating with impunity down in Latin America, but the school right here in Columbus, Georgia. Right down the road at Fort Benning, torture manuals were used in the classroom, and neither the school nor those responsible for the curriculum have been held accountable.
In June 1996, the White House Intelligence Oversight Board released a report stating that the School of the Americas had used improper instruction materials in training Latin American officers from 1982 to 1991. Certain passages in the manuals appear to condone practices such as executions of guerrillas, extortion, physical abuse, coercion, and false imprisonment. The manuals were traced back to the 1965 CIA Project X that taught foreign officers to kidnap, blackmail, and spy on nonviolent political opponents.
When I was captured, I was taken to an unknown place. I was blindfolded and handcuffed, and I was tortured for about 1 week and a half.
After 4 nights of being tortured, I decided to confess. I said, okay, what can I do? Okay, you want me to tell you guys that I've been in Cuba? Okay, I have been in Cuba. Don't torture me anymore. And then immediately the torturer said, now you got to tell me who went with you. Who gave you the money? Who gave you the passport? And I say, I'm sorry, but I've never been in Cuba. So I am telling you because I want you to stop torturing me, but I've never been in Cuba. Of course, he didn't believe me, and he began to torture me again. When I came out of the chamber of torture, where I left a lot of people being tortured, and they took away the blindfold from me, I realized that I was in the National Police headquarters. But what happened is that the Red Cross International came looking for me. You see, I was a ghost prisoner there. And that exactly brings memories of what happened in Abu Ghraib. When the Red Cross International came to Abu Ghraib, you know, the prisoners were taken away from them, and that happened to me. What the Salvadorian army did in El Salvador is what the USA Army is doing now in Abu Ghraib, in Afghanistan, in Guantanamo Bay.
We read about the torture that went on at this Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. Well, you know, we received many calls from the media. Is this an aberration? Is it an isolated incident? And of course, what we learned is that it's not. When I was in Vietnam as a young Navy lieutenant, I mean, it was common knowledge that torture was part of our policy there. These Vietnamese prisoners were questioned in this Huey helicopter over the jungle. Officers I knew bragged about this. And when they didn't talk, they just threw them out of the helicopter, you know, 2 miles up in the air. And they thought it was funny when all of a sudden, you know, after they would throw 2 or 3 out of the helicopter, the others would start speaking. They thought this is, you know, just brilliant.
The problem that the School of the Americas is going to have in future years is the same problem our military generally is going to have, and that is the whole notion that there seem to be in the ascendancy in our federal government people that appear on their face to condone torture. That's going to be the problem that our military is going to have to confront in the future, and it's a problem of our own making.
As more evidence connected School of the Americas graduates to torture, death squads, and massacres in Latin America, bills were introduced in the U.S. Congress to cut funding and close the school.
Even if the terrorists we taught at the School of the Americas didn't learn anything that helped them victimize people they were supposed to protect, we should not be giving them the legitimacy and the prestige associated with the official support from the United States government.
The opportunity to train thousands of Latin American military in our country, in our traditions, in our human rights processes is invaluable, because a few go wrong does not vitiate the enormous good that comes from this school.
Providing professional education and training to military, law enforcement, and civilians is WHINSEC's reason to be. 24 courses are offered each year, ranging from 2-week cadet orientations to the year-long Command and General Staff Officer course. Democracy and human rights training is a mandatory component of every course and is presented at the beginning to be used throughout.
I'm happy to say that no one's been fooled here. It's still about men with guns. It's still on Fort Benning. The same soldiers are coming in from the same countries with the same instructors. They say to us that they're teaching democracy. Many of us who were in the military know one thing very clearly. We did not learn democracy in the military.
But I thought that with a very clear portrayal of what the school is all about, with the openness of the school and the willingness to discuss, that people would soon realize that the issue is gone away. Yes, but there may still be problems down there, but the school is not generating those problems.
Why would the Pentagon hold on to a school that would have every year thousands at the main gate calling for its closure? This school, with its thousands of graduates, they simply provide the muscle for U.S. foreign policy in Latin America. They protect our economic interests there.
We're invested in controlling Latin America today, not because of the threat of communism, but because of the threat that we'll lose those resources. Oil is a big one, of course. There's a lot of oil in what we call the Amazon Crescent, which goes from Venezuela through Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, part of Bolivia. It has more oil than the Middle East.
Donde fueron 12 muertos y actualmente ha pasado 2 años y medio y no ha habido ningún pronunciamiento del gobierno nacional, ya que el presidente Álvaro Uribe Vélez es paramilitar y tiene el respaldo de los Estados Unidos del presidente Bush y es responsable de todas las masacres y de todos los atropellos y violaciones a los derechos humanos que estamos viviendo en Colombia.
We in the United States are told that we're training these people and we're sending funds down to Colombia in order to combat drug trafficking. An awful lot of what's going on in Colombia is resistance against our oil companies, against the exploitation of those lands. So we bring the Colombian military up to the United States to train at the School of the Americas and at other facilities. And we tell the people of the United States that we're doing this to fight drugs. The Colombians will look at drugs as being our problem. What their problem is being able to use their own resources to help themselves. Look at the case of Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. We overthrew him essentially earlier in this decade, but because he had control of the army And because he was very, very popular and also had control of the oil company, he was able to get back into power. I'm sure the people in Washington and at the School of the Americas wish that they had had much stronger contacts with more of the hierarchy of the Venezuelan military at that time and could have used those connections to make sure that Chavez didn't get back into power.
Without question, this is a dangerous enemy to our South, controlling a huge pool of oil that could hurt us very badly. We have the ability to take him out, and I think the time has come that we exercise that ability. We don't need another $200 billion war to get rid of one, strong-armed dictator. It's a whole lot easier to have some of the covert operatives do the job and then get it over with.
How do people of other countries, other cultures, see us in the United States? All I can say is how they see us is not how we see ourselves. There is a big difference.
I talked to Roy on the day of 9/11, or the day after, perhaps. He was at Fordham University, I remember. He told me about watching the towers go down. And from the beginning, folks here were saying, Roy, don't do it. This is not a good year. This is a military town. This is an installation where men are about to be going to war.
I get a call from General Lemoyne, the commanding general of Fort Benning. He was requesting that we call off our November protests. He said, this is no time to be protesting. We're at war with the terrorists now.
Here we just had a major attack on a country, one of the worst that's ever happened to it. And then we have to contend with a protest. And I understand they have a right to protest, but the timing was horrible.
President Bush kept saying over and over again that we had to go after these terrorist training camps wherever they were and shut them down. What we were saying now was that a good place to start was right here in our backyard.
Nobody was in kind of the mood to highlight all this, and the protest simply highlighted the issue again. So we asked if we could skip 1 year.
We took serious his request, but we all came to the conclusion that it was more important than ever for us to go to that main gate and call for the closing of this school.
We felt like that was indifferent to the what was happening in the country throughout the United States at the time, but we respected their right to protest.
A week and a half before the demonstration was to occur, the city filed a lawsuit, and they asked a judge to stop the demonstration. They claimed that there was a danger of terrorists being at the demonstration. They claimed that anthrax was going to be at the demonstration.
We could just envision several thousand people at one location and somebody throw a hand grenade in the crowd or a plane come in here, and we thought it was common sense to hold off and let things settle down a little bit.
Finally, at the end of a long day, and this is a very important moment for the future of the movement, the judge spoke, and he said, this march will go on.
When your country needs your support, and they need you to rally around the flag, if you will, there's a time to do it, and a patriotic American will do that. And sometimes your personal agenda may have to go away. The inference is not that because people protest, they're not patriotic, but when a country is in a war, then I think there's more reason to rally around the country and support the country.
there is a sense among law enforcement, there is a sense among elected officials that people should not be protesting. They should not be protesting after September 11th. They should not be protesting during the war in Iraq. They should not be protesting outside of a military base. And there's a sense that the people who are protesting are somehow less American or less patriotic.
I think that there's something to be said for the fear of being isolated and being cut off and you know, being called unpatriotic and un-American is very hurtful. And I think that's really what people don't want to go through. They don't want to. Everyone loves this country. No, I love this country. I don't want people to say that I don't love this country because I'm asking questions. And so it's easier just to be quiet. Until I had children, it didn't take a really personal toll. When the war finally started, this last war finally started, they did say, please don't get in trouble. They'd gotten the message that to speak out, you were going to be marginalized. One of my youngest nieces was in a play, and the teacher made a point of telling my sister that I would not be allowed in if I came to see it. And in Florida, where I have relatives, there was a hate jock that had asked for someone to kill me, so they were nervous about safety issues, which you know, the world's tense enough without having people threaten your mom.
I've often said the Nazis had no problem murdering 6 million Jews. The only problem was murdering the first one without objection. I take you, and he doesn't say anything. Then I take him, and he still doesn't say, and then I take him, and there's nobody to complain. That's how they did it. And what's happening now, and God forbid, I'm not equating our government to Nazism, but the parallel, I think, is clearly seen that, you know, where you don't have voices of dissent, then you just are, you know, unrelenting, and you can never know that you're right or wrong.
I went to Iraq just before the invasion, weeks before, and I came back and was an outspoken critic of that invasion. I have never, ever, as a Catholic priest, received such hostility from people in churches. I went to Vietnam because I believed our leaders. I thought it was my patriotic thing to do, my responsibility. And I bought into this cause being noble. We were going to be the liberators. I was actually willing to give my life for my country. And that's pretty patriotic. And I can only say that today I am more patriotic than I was back then.
While voices of dissent faced increased public scrutiny in the wake of September 11th, the city of Columbus posed a new challenge to the SOA protesters.
As it turns out, in 2002, right before we arrived, the police announced that they didn't have the authority to cancel the protest, but they were going to require that every person who walked into the site actually go through metal detectors.
There had never been a case in all of the United States courts that had allowed mass searches of nonviolent demonstrators. And this was the first time that a governmental entity had even tried this.
We will not use or instigate violence against any person. We will act with respect for the people and property of the local community.
SOA demonstrations have a, over a decade of history. Not a single arrest for a violent act, except for 1 year when a counter-demonstrator threw feces.
We went to court, and what we felt like was reasonable law enforcement techniques that the chief wanted to impose. It really wasn't, in our opinion, a search. It was just a wand, passing over the body with a wand. And so we didn't think that was very intrusive. We thought that would be welcomed by protesters, too.
Only 4 entrances to this protest, 4 6-foot entrances that they're going to make all 10,000 people come in and go out of.
It was like having, 12,000 people trying to board a Delta Airlines flight.
Search. We do not consent to this illegal search.
We saw this on the national level, protesters being cordoned off and caged like animals. And I think, unfortunately, it does represent a move by the government to use as an excuse to chill dissent the fact that we're fighting a war against terror.
We're there to protect them also. And I don't really believe they believe that. You know, if somebody was shot, the first question I'm going to ask is, why didn't y'all take some action to prevent this, to protect us? It's government's job to try to balance those rights without infringing on either one of them and to protect the rights of both. Sometimes it is a close line there and it's difficult.
The government claimed that they were justified in searching all the demonstrators because a handful of them committed what the government called criminal acts. They walked across a line onto the base, committed an act of trespass. And they equated that act with one that would be an indicator of terrorism.
And we lost. The local federal judge said, you know, things are different since September 11th, and, you know, we have to try to work at being more safe.
I represent the organization that Dr. Martin Luther King co-founded with other ministers. We were formed to bring about the eradication of violence. We're here to shut down the School of Americas. We are here to do it. It is wrong to perpetrate violence. It is wrong to discriminate. It is wrong to torture on the name of Dr. Martin Luther King. Hell no, we ain't gonna take it no more. We're not gonna take it no more. It is wrong. It is wrong. I'm ready to go to jail. It's not enough just to march and stand up to give a speech. I want to lay down at Fort Benning and go to jail.
Using the wisdom of Gandhi and all the movements for social change, from the abolitionists to the suffragists to the labor movement to the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. In the end, the change happens when good people break bad laws and accept the consequences. When you take a risk, and it's hard. And that's why I think crossing the line and breaking unjust laws is critically important to movements for social change. And that's what we're doing at the School of the Americas.
It's become a tradition when we gather at the main gate early on. We started to cross the line, to go on to Fort Benning, which is a military reservation.
For the first 10 years the protest existed, thousands crossed the line onto Fort Benning and were arrested for trespassing. In 1998, over 2,000 protesters crossed the line and were escorted off the base and released. But after September 11, 2001, federal and city officials fenced off the protesters' entrance to Fort Benning and started more strictly enforcing the laws regarding federal trespass.
What people have suffered as a result of being prosecuted here is, by and large, most people are getting 3 to 6 months in federal prison. And prior to September 11th, the government only prosecuted a small percentage of the people who crossed the line. Since September 11th, the government has prosecuted nearly 100% of the people who crossed the line.
What we do, I think what all of us try to do with our lives, if we are inspired by the gospel or led by the gospel, is find some measure to unite the will of the Spirit to the work of the flesh. I think that's what this is really all about. That got a big laugh.
Tell us about your experience crossing over a couple years ago.
Well, it was a very profound experience. I had the honor of being arrested here several times, and the last time with my dear friend Father Bill O'Donnell.
Please stand, please. Thank you.
so many of the people that are in the SOA movement are in it because they know somebody who has crossed the line. They know somebody who's risked arrest, because that makes it real. I got all the information I could to make the decision, talked to the people I loved, and then prayed and felt what was inside and recognized that there was arguments on both sides, but they didn't really matter. What mattered was I was called to do this. I made the decision to cross the line because I see that as the best way to close the School of the Americas.
And I said, so you're going to do all of this, you're going to sacrifice Brian, and you really think it's going to make a difference? I said, I don't. I said, Brian, even if you get this school closed, do you think it's not going to open up someplace else?
The fear of the ramifications of what will happen if you do something is not as great as living with yourself if you don't. I think the times when I've had the most regret has never been when I've taken action. It's always been when I've not taken action.
Each year, the School of the Americas protest concludes with a funeral procession to remember and pray for those who have been murdered by SOA and WHINSEC graduates in Latin America. Calling for the closing of the school, protesters carry crosses bearing the names of the people who have been killed.
When we say presente, not only are the dead the ones who have been killed in the struggle, but the presente is to summon our own souls to be present to the new reality and to call it into being. Presente.
We do not ask for forgiveness for the crimes that we have committed as a nation. And so when I crossed onto the base, I was praying for the forgiveness that we've never asked for.
It is the policy of this installation that no partisan political demonstration be held within the bounds of Fort Benning. The sole purpose of this installation is to provide for the military training of soldiers. Military activities on this installation must be conducted totally free of entanglement with partisan political issues. If you enter this installation, you will be in violation of Section 1382, Title 18, United States Code, and subject to fine and imprisonment.
Continue to gather here in ever larger numbers in the name of peace, in the name of our sisters and brothers of Latin America who have been the victims of our country's foreign policy in this school that has caused them to suffer. And so we will continue to gather. But I'll tell you, if we shut it down this coming year, we will be back here next November for a big celebration.
I think closing the School of the America is going to bring a lot of good things to Latin America.
First, it will stop the suffering carried out by the School of America's graduates. But also, countries can, in a way, retake their own business, not being worried that the School of America graduate can, in a given moment, carry a coup against a democratic institution.
The people of our nation have to recommit ourselves to these values that we profess of liberty and equality and justice for all. If we do that, both internally and in our role in the world, then there's going to be tremendous hope.
We have been energized, and though we may not understand or see the immediate effects of dissent and questioning, you may have affected someone that you don't even know. The next time you turn on that TV, maybe you look at the news a little bit differently, and maybe you look at protesters a little bit differently.
Of what importance could it be, any of the things that you keep by keeping your mouth shut, when someone else is suffering? And what do you gain by opening it up, It's so deeply personal. It's really between you and God.
They cannot silence us. If they send us to prison, we will speak from prison. And when we get out of prison, we are going to continue to speak even clearer and bolder than before. We are not going away until the school is closed, shut down. History